Hello and welcome to my 7.2.5 Windwalker Monk Guide, which I've finally been able to make after ages and ages of saying that I'm actually going to make one. I'm finally making it now because I got the time to do it. I'm going to leave some timestamps in the description if you want to skip to a specific part of the guide. So to start off, we got Blackout Kick. This is just your general filler ability. This is what you'll use when you pretty much have nothing else to press. So you might have access to Strike of the Windlord and Fist of Fury, but it might not be a good time to use them. So, you'll Sun Kick, and when you've got nothing else to do, Blackout Kick, generate some more Chi, Blackout Kick, generate some more Chi, Blackout Kick, Sun Kick's off cooldown, so it's your filler ability. Jade Lightning, this is an ability which uses energy and doesn't really do that much damage. It does have a knockback built into it, but it only knocks them back if they melee attack you while you're channeling it. If you want to know how to knock people back, I did make a video on it a while back, which is still relevant, but to essentially cover it, you lure a melee over to a cliff, and then you sap them at the cliff. And then you walk to the other side and you face them towards the cliff. And you start channeling your Jade Lightning. As soon as that paralysis breaks, they'll auto attack you and then they'll go off. That's pretty much how you do it. I made a video on it and I covered exactly how you can set it up, but that's pretty much the use for correcting Jade Lightning. It's also good for keeping people in combat, so if you see a rogue and he's running at you and he's in line of sight, you don't want him to get a reset. You can Jade Lightning him to keep him in combat, or when he's running around a pillar, you can use it to stall and keep him in combat just a little bit longer. So Detox is your cleanse. This removes poisons and diseases. Good examples of things to detox off people. If you're versing a hunter and then your partner gets wyvern stung, you can take that off by detoxing them. You can't of course detox yourself if you get caught in it, but if your partners get stuck in a wyvern sting, then you can detox them. Another example is you can use it when you're fighting an assassination rogue. So if you're 1v1ing them, you can sap them, detox your poisons off before you heal so you get more out of them. Or if your partner's getting trained, you can peel the assassination rogue off, detox them so that they can have a chance to move away, because their slow is a poison as well. So by detoxing, you're getting rid of that slow. Next, Disable is your slow and also your root. Disable will root a target if they're already slowed, and it'll root them for 3 seconds. And then it DRs down to 1.5 and then 0.8 seconds. Now, because Disable will root a target that's already snared, you can Serpent Kick in, land, and then root immediately without having to disable twice. But this root is really good for peeling melee. A cool trick with Disable is one, paralysis refreshes it. So, if you slowed someone, you can sap them at the end of your disable to refresh it without having to get back in range if it's kind of too dangerous to get near them, and that slow is really important. Or you can use Jade Wind, and this is actually really helpful against melee. You can disable both of the melee, and then when you Jade Wind, it's just constantly refreshing it. Like every half second is just ticking and refreshing that disable without you having to actually hit that guy. So if you're fighting like a double melee cleave, you can disable both your targets, run Jade Wind, and it's just constantly refreshing a slow. Next is a Fuse. This is just your casted heal. Doesn't do a hell of a lot of healing, but if you've basically got nothing else to do, this is what you're going to be using to keep yourself alive. Next up is Fist of Fury. This is one of your main damage dealers, and it kind of complements your burst. Because you're mainly going to be running with heavy-handed strikes, and it's got that stun at the end of it, you're going to be leg sweeping, and then at the end of your leg sweep you follow it up with a Fist of Fury. One thing to note about Fist of Fury right now is it will be usable from a pretty big range, but it doesn't actually start hitting them at the max range. It's kind of buggy. I'm pretty sure that it still has a 10-yard range, but it only starts hitting at 8 yards like it says in the tooltip. So be wary of that. If you're at max range from a target and you Fist of Fury, it's most likely not going to stun them or do damage. With Fist of Fury, it's not something that you really use off cooldown unless you're running Tiger Eye, in which case you can use it off cooldown, but because it's got the stun baked into it, using it off cooldown is going to mess up your stun DRs, because the cooldown will be less than that of the time required to actually reset stun DR. So if you leg sweep into a Fist of Fury and then you Fist of Fury off cooldown, it's going to be quarter DR'd, and then you're not going to be able to stun anyone for the next 20-ish seconds. Next is Flying Serpent Kick. This is just one of your gap closers. Just use it. If you tap it again at the end, you'll stop and you'll slow people around you. Next is Paralysis. Paralysis is just one of your main forms of CC. It's a 4-second duration incapacitate with a 15-second cooldown. You can use it to either CC an off target before you burst, or it can be used to set up your kill target for a burst. Now, because I'm a panda, I can kind of do both. So if I really wanted to, I could panda ratio him, sap him, and then set this guy up for a burst. But since most people are not going to be a panda, you can pick the situation. If your partner's going to take care of the CC on a different target, then you can sap the kill target, so you can set him up so it doesn't pop cooldowns or get away from you. Most of the time, what I'll do in a situation like 2s, when I'm playing healer DPS, I'll sap an off target, and then I'll sweep kill target, and I'll just start bursting him. And then my healer will follow up that sap with any kind of CC. So if it's a druid, he'll clone him. If it's a paladin, he'll hodge him, so on and so forth. And when you use paralysis for setting up kills, it's basically just so they don't move or pop anything before you actually go for your burst. Sometimes people that you're hitting will unexpectedly use mobility, and then you'll miss a stun. So if you're fighting a Resto Druid, and you run up to him and he thinks you're gonna stun him, he might displace a beast, you might miss your leg sweep, and then you have to wait 45 seconds. So the safer option would be to sap him so he can't do that, and then you move in and then go for the sweep. And also with things like Resto Druids, if they see you waddling towards them because you want to do a swap, they're probably just going to go bear form. But if you see them shift out of bear form and you really want to go for the Druid, as soon as he shifts out of bear form, you can sap him, and then you can do a sweep to follow that up so then he can't shift bear form. So it's got multiple uses. It can be used to crush CC, it can be used to set up kills on a kill target so they stay still when you're about to burst them, or it can be used to peel people. If your healer is getting trained, you can sap one of the DPS so that they get off him, and then you can chuck a slow on them, and then your healer should be fine. Next is Provoke. This is just a taunting ability. The only time that I've ever used Provoke in any kind of constructive way was using Provoke to taunt a hunter's pet off my partner so that he can go and eat some mage food. But that's pretty much the only reason that I could think of even using Provoke. I'm not even sure if that works anymore because I haven't done it in such a long time. And considering that mage food got nerfed, it might not even be worth doing, but that's certainly something that you can give a shot. Resuscitate, this is just your reviving spell, and because you have like 40% haste, this is a really short cast compared to other people's reses. So if there's any point in which you are free and you can maybe get a res on your partner, go ahead and chuck it out because Windwalkers have a really fast casting one. Next up is Sun Kick. This is one of your rotational abilities. It puts a debuff on the target which reduces their healing taken, which is definitely something that you want to be keeping up. Next is Roll. This is again one of your gap closers. Pretty simple. A couple of tricks that I wanted to talk about with Roll. You can get extra distance out of a roll if you aim it towards like an edge and you're on elevated ground. You'll hit it and then you'll go extra distance because you maintain the momentum off the edge. So this can be good in a place like Blade's Edge Arena or something like Temple of Kotmogu where there's elevated ground and you can get more distance out of your roll. Now at the same time there's a way to get less distance out of your roll, and you might think why, but sometimes you're fighting someone and they're just out of range of you. So for example, like you roll and you get taken about like 3 of these in distance. And let's just say that your target's standing like right in the middle there and you like can't reach them because you're slowed and they're like waddling away from you. If you want to reduce the distance that your roll goes so you can get up to them, you jump and then you roll. So then you roll less and then you're in range of them. I used to do this a lot with Chi Torpedo because Chi Torpedo used to go really far. So then you would have to jump and then delay your roll by using it mid-air, so that some of the time that you would have spent moving is spent doing nothing. Serenity, it's a talent, but if you spec out of it, it becomes Storm, Earth and Fire. And the way this works is when you press it, the first time it'll put clones out, and then when you press it again, they'll home in on one target, and then they copy your abilities. The reason why we don't use Storm, Earth and Fire is because it is sort of clunky. Sometimes they don't copy abilities because they might be out of range. If they get rooted in place and you're hitting your target, they're not copying your spell, so you're actually losing damage. Because it splits your damage into 3 parts. So you do 50%, and then your clones do 50% each, so it's 150. If you spec Serenity though, it does replace it, and then Serenity just makes all of your chi consumers free, have reduced cooldown, and they hit harder. Spear Hand Strike, this is just your standard kick. Nothing special. Spinning Crane Kick, this is actually a little bit interesting. With Spinning Crane Kick, it hits harder depending on how many targets you've tagged. So if I've tagged one person, its damage is now 383,000. If I tag a second, its damage is now 492. If I go ahead and tag these two, Jade Wind, its damage is now 712,000. So its damage goes up every time you hit an extra target, and it starts hitting harder. The benefit of this is if you're fighting a comp that has pets, so a Demonology Warlock or an Unholy DK, and you run Jade Wind, it's constantly tagging those pets and it's constantly tagging multiple people, so your crane kicks hit harder. And it's not something that you're going to want to be using often. It's not like you're going to want to be, crane kicking, and jabbing, and then crane kicking, and then, you're going to go out of energy really quickly. So you don't really want to do that. The only time you would ever use it in a rotation is if you want to dump excess chi because you've capped out or something. So you can crane kick there, and then you've got 4 chi back, and then you can blackout kick, sun kick, and then you're fine. And then the other time you would use it is if you've got Serenity up, because it's free, and it does substantially more damage than blackout kick would. Because even if you've only tagged one target, blackout kick does 350k, spinning crane kick does 380. So by tagging multiple targets, you're going to be hitting pretty decently hard with crane kick, and it also does decent cleave damage. Next up is Strike of the Windlord, which is one of your main bursting abilities. This is something that you don't really want to use off cooldown. You kind of want to keep it so that it lines up with your sweep, and it naturally does. It's a 40-second cooldown and sweep is a 45. So every time you sweep, you can use a Strike of the Windlord, and then those will line up, and that'll be like your frequent burst. If you throw out your Strike of the Windlord outside of stuns, you're not going to be forcing as much as you would if you were to throw them out in stuns. So Strike of the Windlord, one of your main bursting abilities, and something that you want to save so you can line it up with your stuns. Tiger Palm is just your chi generator. Pretty simple. Sometimes it procs a free black eye kick, which you can just throw out whenever you want. Touch of Death. Again, this is one of your main bursting abilities, and outside in the open world it'll do half your HP as maximum damage. On players, I think it's more like 15 to 20% of your max HP. Touch of Death is something that you'll want to go off during your stun lock, because if it goes off outside a stun lock, then people have a chance to mitigate it. So if you're bursting with Touch of Death, a good way to make sure that it goes off during a stun lock is to sap them, and then during the sap, you can Touch of Death, wait until sap's about to run out, then you can sweep. And by the end of that sweep, that Touch of Death is going to go off, but if it doesn't, then you can Fist of Fury to line that up even more. And if you're wondering how I Touch of Death without breaking the sap, all you have to do is just sap, face a 90-degree angle away from your target, and then you'll be able to use abilities on them without your auto attacks going off. So mainly Disable and Touch of Death. Next is Karma. This is your big defensive. It puts an Absorb shield on yourself equal to half your HP, and then any damage that you take while Karma is active will be reflected to your target in the form of a 6-second damage over time. With the trait that we have here, which is Good Karma, damage that you take while Karma is up also heals you. But since the Absorb is only 50% of your max HP, people are just kind of breaking through it. So in this expansion, if you do Karma, it doesn't mean that you're safe, because the Absorb is really, really low. When you Karma and why you Karma is totally dependent. Sometimes you can offensive Karma if people aren't going you, and you think that you're not in trouble. It can be kind of a risky move, but let's just say you're fighting a druid. You can Karma into Thorns, and then every time you hit him, it'll take 5% of your HP away, which is then being redirected back to that druid. And then if they ever shift out of bear form and then you stun them, they've got that Karma dot ticking on them for like 200k every second, plus your burst on top, so it can be pretty nasty. You can also Karma big hitters like Glacial Spikes, Evan Bolts, Chaos Bolts. When you Karma big hitters like that, it's more of an offensive Karma, or you can use Karma defensively at low HP, and then any damage you take will heal you up as well. But it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. Transcendence and Transcendence Transfer. This is your teleport. You can place your teleport down and then teleport back to it at the 40-yard range, and it swaps the position. And that's something that you have to keep in mind, because since the positions swap, sometimes you might forget about that and like forget to replace your port. Because placing your port down is only a 10-second cooldown, but the actual transfer itself is 25. Or 20 if you're spec'd into Eminence right here. Let's just pretend that this is Blade's Edge Arena and you've left it on top of the bridge, and you're kiting someone underneath the bridge, and you're healing yourself, and then you port back up. Your port is now down there, so then when they run around the bridge, they run back up to come and chase you. If you want to rinse and repeat and do that again, you have to place your port on top of the bridge again and then jump down. Whereas if you didn't replace your port, the next time you teleported, it would be down to the bottom of the bridge. So that's something to always keep in mind. Always be mindful of where your port is. Just always remember, because it's one of your big defensives actually. Just being able to be in the midst of a fight, and you might and then you see danger, like you're about to get stunned or something, you can see that coming, and then you just port away. So that can be really good if you need to teleport away from a Chaos Bolt, or if a warrior pops his burst on you, or if a shaman pops his burst on you, you can just port out of there instantly. So teleporting, this expansion is one of your most powerful defensives, and that's also made real because of Healing Winds, which will heal you for a quarter of your HP every time you teleport. So I just go ahead and take some falling damage. So about 56%, what you can do is Healing Winds by teleporting, Diffuse, double, full health, right? The double healing elixirs was a bit overkill. I could have just used one and then a fuse and it probably would have been full HP as well. But being able to heal like that is actually really, really huge. If you notice that you're fighting something where you're not really using your teleport to run away, you're kind of just like leaving and not doing anything with it. If at that point you're not really getting anything done in terms of damage, you're just kind of waiting for your next setup, there's no reason why you can't just, chuck your port down where you are and heal you. Get the healing off, it'll help your healer a little bit so he can save his mana, and it just makes it easier for you to live. Next is Zen Flight. This isn't usable in arenas or anything, but for world PvP or just traveling outside in the world, it can be used to stop yourself if you're falling from a huge height, and you can actually mount up while on Zen Flight. So you can Zen Flight away from someone and then mount up, or some people don't know that you can do like a Zen Flight into a Hearthstone, so if you're in the middle of the air, you can just Hearth. Right, Zen Pilgrimage is just taking you back to your auto hole. Afterlife, this is actually pretty cool. Whenever you get a killing blow on someone, they'll drop a healing sphere, which actually heals for a decent amount. So if you're doing something like a world PvP, where there's mobs nearby, you can kill the mobs, trigger the healing spheres, and they'll heal you up. Or if it's in an arena and you're in a 1v2 situation, when you kill someone, they'll drop a healing sphere. Next up is your Mastery. When you do an ability which isn't a repeat of the previous one, it does more damage. But the only things that this is really going to apply to is your Black Eye Kicks and your Tiger Palms. Because you're never going to repeat a Sun Kick, because you'd have to wait 6.5 seconds to do that again. And to get the cheat of the Sun Kick again, I have to Tiger Palm. So the only way I'm ever going to repeat a Sun Kick So if I were to stand here, like I just did my previous one, and then I waited 6 seconds, and I energizing elixir, and then I sun kick again, it'll do less damage the second time. So realistically, you're never going to repeat any of your big hitters, so you don't have to worry about that. But when it comes to the other stuff, this is like, you don't want to just be spamming black eye kicks like this. Like, you always want to rotate abilities. So you can, Tiger Palm, black eye kick proc there. At this point, you don't want to jab because you would overcap your chi, so you can Jade Wind, black eye kick, sun kick, and you're just rotating your abilities so you can get the most out of them. Jade Wind, Tiger Palm, Rising Sun kick, Tiger Palm, black eye kick, Jade Wind, Tiger Palm, black eye kick, sun kick, black eye kick. Rotating abilities just so you can get that mastery to do extra damage. In Arena, you do not have a lot of mastery. They just give us an insane amount of haste. So our mastery really doesn't give us that much of an increase, but it does matter. And also, that same mastery is pretty much the same as hit combo, because your hit combo will give you stacks of increased damage every time you trigger your mastery, so every time you're not repeating an ability. So you want to be weaving through abilities if you're running hit combos so that you're gaining that damage increase and not just spamming like black eye kicks when you need to dump chi. All in all, just don't repeat the same ability twice, just weave your abilities and never use the same one twice in a row. And Windwalking, which just gives you a 10% passive movement speed increase to you and your allies within 10 yards. Not a big thing, but it is what it is. Now, I did cover talents recently, but with 7.2.5's release, there's been a couple of changes to what's the strongest in the talents, as well as a change in the final row of the honor talents. So, starting off with the first row, this tier doesn't really matter too much out of Chi Burst, Eye of the Tiger, and Chi Wave. I personally run Eye of the Tiger just because it always works. You don't have to press another button for it, don't have to use globals on it, it's just always doing damage in the midst of you doing everything else. Chi Burst is a decent burst option because you can line up a Chi Burst with a Sun Kick like this during bursts, and you get a little bit more upfront damage. While it does have a cast time, the benefit of it having a cast time is if people kick it, then people won't have a kick for your partners, so that can be a little bit beneficial as well. Chi Wave is okay, it's probably the best to use in like 1v1 situations, but the problem with it is that sometimes it can bounce to other targets, so you might be hitting this guy, and then it'll bounce back to you, and then it'll bounce to this guy, and then hit whatever when you're moving around in the midst of combat. Sometimes the healing part of it will bounce to your partner, and then your partner won't be in range of an enemy target, and then Chi Wave stops bouncing altogether. So it's a little bit of a weird one. It can break CC, it's a little bit annoying. I personally don't really run it anymore because it's not strong enough. So Eye of the Tiger is the most reliable option. I would recommend just taking that, but Chi Burst is also pretty decent. For the level 30 tier, Tiger's Lust is basically the best way to go. Just a straight up 30-second cooldown movement speed increase, which can be used on partners. It just has way more utility over the other two because you can give it to other people. So for example, if you're fighting a Boomkin and then your healer gets root beamed, you can Tiger's Lust with them so that they can get out of the root beam and then start healing again. So Tiger's Lust has just got so much more utility over the other two that it's basically the only choice. For the level 45 tier, Energizing Elixir is the best option. Gives you a full bar of energy and chi. Because it refills your chi, that amounts to 5 chi every minute, assuming you use it at no chi. But the benefit of using Energizing Elixir is that it's on demand. Ascension is a passive and Power Strikes works every 15 seconds, so you might not get that chi when you want it, but you might be in a situation where you need the chi to burst, or you need the chi to Fist of Fury then and there, and you don't have enough energy to Tiger Palm, and you just need it at that moment. You can Energizing Elixir and then use whatever you need. That's the benefit of using Energizing Elixir. The fact that you have complete control over when you use it, and it also gives you the most energy and chi per minute. For level 60 tier, basically have to run Leg Sweep. It's what you use to set up kills, and because monks are a stun-based setup class where you kill people in stuns, you pretty much need it to kill people. The only time I never run Leg Sweep, if I'm playing double Windwalker, sometimes one of us will run Ring of Peace. If we're fighting something like a Discipline Priest, where he'll put his barrier down, and then you can drop your Ring of Peace inside the barrier and it'll push him out. But that's only if I'm playing double Windwalker. If I'm playing alone, I will still take a Leg Sweep for the stun, because that's how you score kills. For the level 75 tier, Healing Elixirs is basically the way to go. Reason being, it's just a 15% heal every 30 seconds. You can combine it with something like Fortifying Brew, which will increase your health, and then Healing Elixirs will actually heal more, because your max health is higher. Diffuse Magic, I haven't been using this as often since it got nerfed from WoD into Legion, because it used to be a 90% damage reduction, but now it's only a 60%. And because Healing Elixirs is on demand now as well, it's actually pretty decent. For the level 90 tier, this whole tier, it pretty much got nerfed with the release of 725. Hit combo is only a 6% damage increase, Zwin's damage got nerfed, and Jade Wind only tags 2 targets, but its damage stayed the same. This tier is basically just whatever you want. A 6% damage increase on your hit combo will mean that your burst damage is going to be better, because your Sun Kicks, your Strike of the Windlord is going to be hitting harder all the time. Zuen would probably do the most damage out of all of them, but if you're playing like a setup based comp, Zuen can be really annoying when it breaks CC, like it breaks polymorphs, it breaks saps. And then you've got Jade Wind, which can be pretty good against any comp where you're going to be doing cleave damage, so something like TSG, or just like any melee cleave. And because it gives you stacks of Mark of the Crane, if you were fighting something like Turbo Cleave, and you use Jade Wind, it'll tag all the mobs around you. So within 2 uses of Jade Wind, you've got 4 stacks of Spinning Crane Kick, so then when you pop Serenity and you're using Crane Kick, it's actually hitting pretty hard. So really, like, you can play with any of these, it's not going to make a big difference. It's kind of like the first tier, in the level 15 tier. These are all just pretty minor additions to your class. So if you just want a reliable choice, take Hit Combo. It will just give you damage and there's no drawbacks. If you want the most damage, you can take Zuen, and Jade Wind is just good for cleaving. For the level 100 tier, Serenity is the best option now. The reason being is because of the cooldown reduction during Serenity, because Serenity reduces the cooldowns of all your chi spenders by 50%, and because they buff Sun Kick's damage by like over 20% at this point, Sun Kick is hitting really hard, and that's where the majority of your burst damage is coming from. It'll allow you to get 2 or 3 Sun Kicks off during your Serenity window, and that's really good for your burst. I personally just find that Stormlength and Fire is too unreliable to run with, but Dragon Punch's damage did also get buffed with the release of 725, so it might be decent, but I just hate using it. Serenity is just a much more reliable and bursty choice, and because monks are all about bursts, that's pretty much your best bet. Chi Orbit used to be a decent choice, but Serenity is just too good to pass up at this point. So at the end of it all, this is sort of the talent build that I run with. It's just a reliable build which you can't really go wrong with. So now getting into the honor talents, your trinkets depend on what race you are pretty much. Gladiator's Medallion is basically what you're going to run most of the time. Adaptation, it's decent against a couple of comps, but any comp that can bait out your adaptation by like using a spammable CC. So like if you came across something like RMD or RMP and you were running Adapt, the rogue could just sap you in the opener, get your Adapt off, and then open on you and you've got no trinket. So something like that is not a good time to run Adapt. And I would probably only recommend running Adapt as a monk if you're a human monk, but even then it's still kind of iffy. And Relentless is a decent choice if you're an orc running against a stun heavy team, because those stuns that they put on you are going to be halved in duration, so you're just spending a lot more time out of CC. But for pretty much any other race, you're going to be running normal trinket because you have complete control over it. Whenever you're in danger, you can press it and you're out. For the second row, you'd be taking reinforced armor most of the time. It's actually really good for monks because reinforced armor gives you a maximum health increase, and the majority of your healing actually comes from percentage based heals, so healing elixirs and healing winds. Having more health means your heals do more healing. And then you've got Sparring, which is better against a comp which has a lot of just physical melee attacks. But for the majority of the time, you're going to be running Reinforced Armor. For the third row, you're mainly going to be taking Eminence. Having the reduced cooldown on your Transcendence Transfer means that you're going to have it more often. Having it on a shorter cooldown means that you can get out of sticky situations easier, and because of its lower cooldown, you're getting healing out of your Transcendence more often because it's off cooldown earlier. If you feel like you're fighting a comp and you're just not using your teleport often because you don't need to, then Fast Feet would be a better option. It doesn't even do that much, but I mean, if you're not using the Transcendence Transfer, it's better to move a little bit quicker. So next, Fall Brew, pretty much your only option. Control the Mist will mess around with your energy because the effuses that it gives you aren't free. Even though the instant cast, they're not free of energy. So Control the Mist encourages you to use effuses in your rotation, but then that's screwing up your damage because you're running out of energy really quick. It's basically like using Tiger Palm but not getting any chi out of it. You're just healing yourself a little bit. Zen Moment, pretty much don't use it. It used to be good, because there was a point where it would, instead of decreasing the effect, it would increase it. So every time you used an attack which triggered combo strikes, it would go to 25% damage reduction, 30, 35, 40, and it would keep on going up every time you use an ability. But now it does the opposite, so it's crap. So run Fall Brew here. For the next tier, I run Tiger Style in things like BGs and just casual PvP, because having that extra utility with your Serpent Kick and being able to turn around corners and jump at the end of your Serpent Kick and get extra distance is just great, and it feels really fun to use. In competitive PvP, that you're pretty much going to be running Disabling Reach, because Disabling Reach allows you to slow people without you being in melee range of them. So oftentimes when you fight something that kites you, you might not have enough mobility to be able to catch up to them just with your rolls, so having Disabling Reach to be able to just, root them from a range is really helpful. And it's also really good against melee. When you're trying to peel melee off yourself or off other people, you don't have to get into melee range with them to be able to slow them. So you can stay out of melee range, avoid getting hit yourself, and slow people for peels. Rather Wind can be good if you need to help your partners run away from something, but the utility of disabling reach and being able to just get around really quick with Tiger Style, I don't really ever take Ride the Wind. For the final row, you're not going to be taking Grapple Weapon. That's not because it's bad, it's just because the other options are better. Heavy-handed strikes adds a stun to your Fist of Fury, which is really important for scoring kills, because you can Fist of Fury stun at the end of your leg sweep to get off an extra couple of seconds of CC on your target. And also being able to use Fist of Fury stun when your leg sweep's on cooldown. Fist stun is really important for monks because it just allows you to get more setups more frequently. And it puts out a lot of pressure when you're stunning that often. But the alternative is Tiger Eye, and the way it works is it goes through all armor but decreases your damage by 20%. Now, every class has more than 20% armor. I'm pretty sure mages have like 21%. So Tiger Eye is only going to give you a couple of percent of a damage increase. So it's either have Fist Stun against a mage, which is really slippery, or have a 2% damage increase. It's not worth it all. But then Tiger Eye is really powerful against something like a Holy Paladin, because it turns all your damage into nature damage. It doesn't just give you 100% armor penetration, all of your things deal nature damage. So it goes through things like Blessing of Protection. And I've won games because Tiger Eye Brew has allowed me to hit through bop and keep pressure up. But it genuinely just depends on the comp you're fighting and the races that the other people are. And so that's why Fist Stun is like the most reliable option, because you can never go wrong with an extra stun. But I found that like over half my games are against Arms Warrior Arsham, and they're both Orcs running Relentless. And I'm just like, Fist Stun does nothing against this. So then I run Tiger Eye, and then I'm going through all that armor that the Shaman has, that the Warrior has, and I'm dishing out way more damage. So when it comes down to it, if you're in 2s and you're playing a stun heavy comp, so something like Windwalker HPAL, or Windwalker Sub-Rogue, or Windwalker, Double Windwalker. You know, if you've got a lot of stuns coming out, Tiger Eye Brew is a decent option because you're trading your Fist Stun for your partner stun, and then you get off more damage. But when it comes to 3s, again, if you're playing a stun heavy comp, you can maybe run Tiger Eye. Comps that are good for Windwalkers now aren't stun heavy, so you're playing with things like mages, shamans, boomkins, so on and so forth. It's still not something that I'm completely 100% sure about, because sometimes I'll run Tiger Eye Brew against a Arms Warrior Arsham team, and it'll work great, and then the next time it will feel bad. And I'll be like, oh, I wish I had Fist Stun at that point. But then there's times where it's like, okay, I didn't need Fist Stun there, Tiger Eye Brew was a really amazing choice. But from my personal experience, it's good against things like Holy Paladins, Arshams, and Arms Warriors if you're playing with a partner who has a stun to back up you losing your Fist Stun. So I've played a lot of Windwalker HPAL this season, so my Paladin can use his Hodge for CC. If I'm playing double Windwalker, one of us will run Tiger Eye, the other will run Heavy-Handed Strikes, assuming the comp has something that Tiger Eye is going to benefit from. But if you're fighting leather wearers or cloth wearers, it's pretty much not worth it all. So, quick summary, Tiger Eye against heavily armored targets where you don't feel like you need Fist Stun, and the damage would be a better trade-off. Otherwise, Heavy-Handed Strikes. So with every single ability covered now, we're going to go into the overall Windwalker Rotation. Now, I'm going to say it straight up, the Windwalker Rotation is very, very easy. In terms of just doing damage when you're not bursting, it's super, super easy. You pretty much just have to make sure that you're keeping Sun Kick on cooldown and not repeating the same ability twice. And the way that looks is, you just Tiger Palm someone, first glow will be Rising Sun Kick, so you can get that healing debuff on them. Then you need Chi, so you Tiger Palm, Black Eye Kick. Tiger Palm, Sun Kick's off cooldown again, so use that. Tiger Palm, Black Eye Kick. Tiger Palm, Black Eye Kick. Sun Kick, Black Eye Kick, Tiger Palm, Black Eye Kick. That's assuming that you're not running Jade Wind though, right? If you're running Jade Wind, then you want to weave that in and prioritize Jade Wind over Black Eye, because it will do more damage and it will cleave as well. So what that would look like, you run in, Tiger Palm, Sun Kick, Jade Wind, Black Eye Kick, Tiger Palm, Black Eye Kick, Tiger Palm, Sun Kick, Jade Wind, Blackout, Tiger Palm, Black Eye Kick, and you just weave the abilities together, right? So never repeating the same ability, but just keeping Sun Kick on cooldown, pretty much. That's all it is. And then you might be wondering, what about Fist of Fury, what about Shackle and Windlord? Keep in mind, this isn't PvE. In PvP, it's way different, because you're not just keeping everything on cooldown to do the most damage, you want to line everything up. Windwalkers kill during stuns, because our sustained damage is pretty lackluster. This isn't a class where you can just sort of wail on someone and then just kill them through pressure, because that's not what you do. You kill people during stun-based kill situations, and when you burst them during those stuns and your partner helps you if you're playing 3s or double DPS 2s, that's how you score kills. So when it comes to Fist of Fury and Shackle and Windlord, those aren't things that you use in your general rotation. In your actual rotation, you're literally just Sun Kicking, Jade Winding, and Black Eye Kicking. That's it. As long as you're keeping that sun kick on cooldown, you're doing it right, pretty much. So that's literally it for the rotation. It's pretty simple. Next thing we're going to talk about is how to burst people. If you want to see how to burst with Storm Within Fire as well, I made a video on that a while back, which is still relevant. But to burst with just Serenity itself, it's really quite simple. You would just initially sweep someone, wait for the global cooldown to reset, then start off with a Sun Kick, Strike of the Windlord, Blackout Kick, Crane Kick, followed up with a Fist of Fury, and then Sun Kick again. So that looks like this. Now, in an arena, it's going to look a little bit different to that, and the reason is the cooldowns are different, you know. It said that my Sun Kick was off cooldown before I could have done that fist, and it will be, but you don't want to do that because then there'll be a gap in your CC. The whole idea of bursting as a monk is keeping them stun locked. So when you open up with that initial sweep, you know, you're not always going to do those 4 abilities. You're not always going to Sun Kick, Windlord, Blackout Kick, Crane Kick, and then fist, because what if they're running Relentless? You know, then you would have to give up one of those globals, so then it would look more like leg sweep into Sun Kick, Strike of the Windlord, Crane Kick, then Fist of Fury. Now, because Fist of Fury's damage isn't that great, if you feel as though you're not going to get all the hits of Fist of Fury off because they might get out of range, what you can do is you can cancel your Fist of Fury early and get off another Sun Kick before Serenity's buff runs out. So in terms of bursting with Serenity, that's pretty much it. But sometimes you want to open up your burst with a Fist of Fury. There's a couple of reasons for this. Sometimes I do this in threes where there's like a monk healer who's selected adaptation. So I'll run in, and because it's adapt, leg sweep will trigger it because it's a 5-second stun. But Fist of Fury will not trigger it because it's a 4-second stun. So if they're like not a human or not an orc and they're running adaptation, so like a night elf, an undead, a Pandaren, whatever, because then adaptation's not going to go off, they essentially have no trinket for the whole game if you do that. You can follow up the Fist of Fury stun with a leg sweep stun and you're still getting 6.5 seconds of CC, which is still pretty good. Now, like I said before, Fist of Fury is only a 2.9 second channel in Arena, so you'd be able to do all the hits of Fist of Fury, get off one more global, and then sweep. So if you wanted to burst on someone with Fist of Fury first, what you would do, you would get on your target, start hitting them, then you would sap off target, into a Serenity, Fist of Fury, full. Outside of the Fist of Fury, you would then Sun Kick, sweep, Strike of the Windlord, Blackout Kick, Sun Kick again. So by that you're not triggering adaptation and you're still getting all of your main hitters off. So it's basically the same burst, but just a different opening stun. Now when you're adding Touch of Death to your burst, there's a couple of ways you can do it. The first way people will do it is they'll do it on their sap target. So when they sap them, they keep them in place, then they'll use Touch of Death like this, so they don't break the sap, and then they'll stun and then do their burst. The other way is stunning and then using Touch of Death after the stun. The only problem with that is that you'll get off one less global, so that you'll do less damage during the stun, and then your Touch of Death won't go off during your stun lock. So the best way to burst with Touch of Death is to, do a sap first on the kill target, then Touch of Death, wait until the sap is about to run off, then you sweep, and do your standard burst. And then your Touch of Death will go off during your stun lock, you get more damage out of it. When you burst like this though, you got to make sure that you're getting some kind of CC on the other person so you don't get stopped on your burst, because you are using your sap to set up that kill. So personally what I would do as a Panzer, if I wanted to burst let's say a Mistweaver and he has no trinket, would be I would Quaking Palm on the kill target into a Touch of Death, then I would sap off target and then sweep just before Quaking Palm goes off, then do my standard burst, and then Touch of Death will go off during the stun, and then, it's probably dead by that time. And with that sap on the target, my healer or partner would then follow up on that CC. He can't dispel if it's a magic effect because he's in those stuns. You're getting cross CC, you're getting cooldowns across the board. So even if he doesn't die because he trinkets and peels, we got cooldowns out of him. So that's how you would burst with Touch of Death. These are things that you're just going to have to pick up on as you play, because there's a lot of different ways things can go. Just because you can burst in that way and that's the best way doesn't mean it's always going to go that way. So that's your rotation, that's your burst rotation. Your standard rotation is going to stay the same all the time. Your burst is going to switch up depending on what the situation is, so it all depends on what you're fighting, what they've got. And this is stuff they're just going to learn by queuing up lots of arenas, and even in battlegrounds you'll learn what targets die with what and so on and so forth. So it's all just practice, it's always just practice. So that basically covers all the gameplay stuff, but I may as well cover all my macros as well. First, you got to cancel aura macro. Everyone should have one of these. You know, cancels things like Zen Flight, Blessing of Protection, Soul on Fire, Jade Wind. Cancels all that stuff when you press it. You know, so like you would want to cancel Jade Wind sometimes if you sap someone. You don't want to run near them and break it, so you cancel the Jade Wind. Sometimes you want to cancel Storm and Fire if you do decide to use it because they might be CC'd and you're getting no damage out of it. Sometimes you want to cancel something like Bop just in case a major spell steals it. So have a cancel macro. That's really good. Next, I've got 3 detox macros. So one will cast detox on myself, the other will cast detox on whoever my healer is, and then one will cast detox on the third partner. I have a focus incapacitate, so if I just hit this, it'll set my focus target, which is him. Pretty simple. Next, I've got a paralysis modifier macro, which will sap either arena target 1, 2, or 3, depending on what I'm pressing. So if I press E by itself, it'll sap arena target 1, which will be the top person on the enemy list, which will show around here. So you have arena target 1, 2, and 3 popping up. It'll sap the first guy. If you then do Control E, or control whatever you've bound it to, it will then sap arena target 2, and then if you press Alt 3, it'll sap arena target 3. Now you don't have to do it in a modifier macro kind of way. If you want to, you can just have 3 separate bindings. If you want, you can kind of do it like this. So you can do /cast target equals arena 1, and then when you press that, it'll sap arena 1, and then you can have it on 3 separate keys if you want to. Next is the exact same thing as detox, except it's for Tiger's Lust. So I got 1 for myself and then 2 for my partners. I got a focus kick, just so when you go to kick someone, you don't have to actually target them, it just kicks your focus target if they're in range. I also have this burst macro, which casts Serenity and uses Tiger Brew and then Salt Water Potions, and also uses my trinket. It'll only cast Serenity and Tiger Brew with each other in arena. All this other stuff is just for Ward PvP and Battlegrounds. And lastly, I've got this Struckler Windlord macro, which does a Struckler Windlord, a Gunpowder Charge, and uses Kill Jaden's Burning Wish all in one. That macro is basically just for Battlegrounds and World PvP. Doesn't serve any purpose in Arena, but I've just got it there anyway. Next, I'm just going to discuss the way that I do key bindings, because if you haven't got key bindings yet, or you're having struggles getting used to them, then this might be helpful to you. Because I didn't start using key bindings until Monks came out, and even like at the start of Mr. Pandaria, I pretty much didn't have key bindings until like 3-4 weeks in, and then I made them all at once, and it was just so much better. So if you haven't made key bindings yet, definitely recommend it. And the way I've done mine is I keybind by association of the letter. So I use a lot of shift bindings. Shift is just a really comfortable binding for me because my little finger is always sitting on shift. No matter what I do, it's pretty much always sitting on shift. So all I have to do to press these bindings is just push my little finger down and then press a letter. And the letter or the button that I press references what the ability kind of does. So for example, I got Shift D. So Shift D is my dispel for every character. D for detox or D for dispel. Shift E for energizing elixir. E for energizing. Shift H for healing elixirs. Shift B for fortifying brew. Shift W for Windlord. Shift Q for serenity. Doesn't match, but when I think burst, I think killing someone quickly. Q for quick. It just makes sense to me. Shift T for trinket. It just goes on and on and on. This is how I do bindings. It might not suit you, but it is a universal thing that you can use on pretty much every single character. You know, if you have a paladin, you can bind Shift F to freedom, Shift B to bubble. If you don't like pressing Shift, you can shift them to control bindings or to alt. I personally don't like pressing control because I feel like it's just sort of a weird location. And then there's alt as well. I just like to use shift as a binding because it feels like it's just really easy to press and it's comfortable for me, and that's fine. So when it comes to initial key bindings, if you've still got bindings for turn left and turn right, get rid of them because it's just a bad habit to have. You should not be, keyboard turning in arena because it slows you down. Like there's no reason why you should, do this as opposed to just, doing that and turning with your mouse. So the best way to get out of keyboard turning as a habit is to just unbind it straight up. The only reason why I've got them bound to a left arrow and right arrow is so that, when I do some kind of cinematic thing, I can, keyboard turn around so it looks a little bit cleaner. But they're on left arrow and right arrow. You're never going to hit those in actual combat. So you want to definitely unbind those. Just bind your strafe to A and D, or you can just keep them on Q and E if that's more comfortable for you. It's entirely up to you. And then you can go through all of your key bindings and find stuff that you don't really use. So for example, you've got like the sit down button. I've just bound that to home because, again, I'm not going to use sit down in an actual situation. So I just bound it to somewhere else just in case I want to use it. So I unbound that and now I'm using that as my leg sweep. and my X is my Touch of Death. And then I've got things like G, J, those are bindings that I didn't use. Whatever they were, I just don't use them. I think they might have been for like the guild tab and stuff like that. Don't use them. Those are the buttons that sit on the side of a mouse, and the way that I know which one to press is because the one that teleports me is the mouse button which is facing towards me, because my mouse buttons have arrows on them, and the one that's facing towards me is the one that returns and brings me back to where I was. So the one that's pointing at me brings me back, and the one that's facing forwards is the one that puts down the port. So it's pretty simple for me to remember. I learned that instantly. As long as the key binding you put down makes sense and is easy to remember, you'll pick up key bindings like it's nothing. And then for the rest of this stuff, it's kind of just either a comfort binding, something that I just found because it was comfortable, or something that made sense. So Shift E for energizing, Shift D for detox, so on and so forth. Just find bindings that are comfortable for you, free them up, and just use them. Like basically all of my bindings are shift bindings. That's just my personal preference. We got R, E, D, C, S, A, B, F, H, Q, W, J, spacebar, Y, X, Z, G, and T. And I got 1, 2, 3, 4, X, Alt 2, and Alt 3, but I should have Alt 1 there. For my targeting, I've bound target nearest enemy to T, because T for target makes sense to me. It is originally bound to tab, that's why they call it tab targeting. But my tab is action button 12, because my main rotational abilities are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I've also got the tilde, or the tilde, the little squiggly thing next to 1, and then tab is underneath that, which is my fuse. So all my rotational abilities are close to my hands. I don't have to struggle moving my hand around for that. And anything that I don't want to press by accident is out of the way of those main rotational abilities, which I'm constantly pressing, yet easy to press. Like, I'm not going to press Karma by accident unless I have like a freak out, like I panic and press a couple of things. Like if I press F by itself, it literally does nothing. But if I press Shift F, then it karmas. So the way I've set it up is, so all my rotational abilities are above my left hand. Tab, tilde, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then all of my cooldowns and important stuff are below my hand, which I'm never going to press by accident. Like I'm not going to press Shift B by accident. If I want to press Shift B, I have to willingly be like, yo, fort brew, and then I'll just move my hand real quick and press Shift B. Or if I need to calm, I'll press Shift F, or Shift H, Shift Q, Shift W, Shift R, E, C. Right, it's all pretty simple to press. It's not stuff that I can press by accident. But again, this is just my personal preference. Like I said, if you haven't made key bindings yet, and you are like struggling to get used to them, give this a go. It might help you out. With all that stuff covered, I just want to quickly talk about races as well. The best race to play on Alliance side is Human, because you get that extra trinket to get you out of stuns. Because monks are a pretty squishy class, having that extra stun trinket is definitely a really good thing for you. And the best race on Horde would either be an Orc or a Blood Elf. Orc is good because you've got Blood Fury, which you can then bind into your burst macro, this one. So you can bind Serenity, Tiger Brew, and then you can put Blood Fury in there as well. Orcs also have reduced stun duration of 25% because of their passive racial, and then you can stack that with Relentless, so pretty much every stun that you sit in is half duration, and every other CC is reduced by 20%, so that's a really powerful set of racials that they get. Whereas Blood Elves, they get a Blood Elf Silence, which is really good at killing casters, because it's just a 2-second blanket silence that costs nothing on a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it lines up with your Serenity burst pretty well. Even though Serenity is a 1 minute 10-second cooldown, when you do your first leg sweep Serenity combo, you have to wait 45 seconds to sweep again, and then by the time that your sweep comes up after that next sweep, your Serenity would have been off cooldown already. And then your Blood Elf Silence will be off cooldown because it's been 1.5 minutes. So pretty much every second setup you do, you have a Blood Elf Silence out of it. So you can leg sweep into Fist of Fury stun, Elf Silence out, for 2 seconds they can't cast anything. So it's like you're making them sit in 9 seconds of CC, which is huge. Racials in this expansion are pretty important, sadly. Having Blood Elf Silence, having Orc Racial, having Human Trinket are all pretty important. It's not like you absolutely need them to be successful. I mean, I'm playing a Panda. I have Quaking Palm. It's a 4-second in cap which DRs with my paralysis. But again, it's got its uses because, you can CC 2 people by yourself and you can set up your kills by yourself. Like I said, you can Quaking Palm kill target into a Touch of Death, and you can sap the off target and then burst him. So you've CC'd 2 people by yourself, right? That's its use. In terms of other racials on Alliance, Night Elves get Shadow Meld. That can be pretty helpful, like if you want to avoid just any dangerous ability. So if you're going to get like Ebon Bolted or Glacial Spiked, Chaos Bolted, you're going to get stuck in CC, you can Shadow Meld it. Dwarves have Iron Skin. I think it just gets rid of like poisons and bleeds and stuff, but I'm pretty sure it shares a cooldown with Trinket. I'm not exactly sure about that, but I remember someone playing Dwarf and saying that it shares a cooldown with Trinket, so yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend going Dwarf. Same thing with Gnome. Gnome Racial just removes movement and pairing effects for them, but as a monk you've got Tiger's Lust coming up every 30 seconds, and your mobility is pretty good, so it's not like you really need that extra snare break. Draenei, I can actually vouch for Draenei. It's actually pretty good for defensives, because I used to be a Draenei, and when they buffed Gift of the Naru, so that the heal would happen over 5 seconds instead of 15, it's actually a pretty decent burst heal, because it does 20% of your max health in 5 seconds, and the heals can crit, so it can heal up to 40% of your max health in 5 seconds. And because it's percentage based, you can combine it with Fort Brew, so that it actually heals more. So theoretically, you could be at, let's just assume that we were at no HP, 0%, right? You could initially teleport heal for 25% of your HP, then double healing elixirs for 30% of your HP, which will bring you up to 55%. Then you could gift the Naru yourself, which can do up to an extra 40%. So let's just say that it did the 20% by itself, you're at 75% HP. While all of that is healing you, you are just spamming your fuses on yourself, you'll be at max health in like 10 seconds from nothing, right? If you did get the crits on Gift of the Naru, it would bring you all the way up to 95% HP, and all you would need is 1 or 2 fuse and you'd be at full HP. That's if you get really lucky. But just having the capability to go from no HP to full HP like that is pretty substantial. Really good for survivability. And I'm pretty sure they get like a passive increase to their strength or their agility, so they hit a little bit harder. Then you have Pandarans, which have Quaking Palm, which incaps people for 4 seconds. Again, it's good for just setting up CC by yourself. You can sap 2 people by yourself, which is good. And even if you're not using it for CC like that, it can count as an interrupt. So if you're like, they're about to get off a really important cast like a Shaylun from a monk, or just a Holy Light that you really want to stop because they're at low HP, you can sap, stop that first one, and then you can Quaking Palm the next one, just be really disruptive. It really talks about Orc Racial. Taurens, they get War Stomp. It's just a short stun, but it would DR all your other stuff. Even though it is a disruptive spell, like Quaking Palm, it DRs with stuns, which is way more important than incapacitates, in my opinion. Trolls, I think they get like an on-use haste increase, which can be nice to combine with Fist of Fury because it will channel quicker. Undeads, they have a Fear Break, which shares cooldown with Trinket. So if you Trinket a Fear and then get stunned, it can be bad because then, they share a 30-second cooldown. So having that extra Trinket for Fears can be decent against some comps. Everybody talks about Blood of Silence, Goblins and Worgans can't be monks, so that's everything, pretty much. Look, all in all, you can play whatever race you want. If you want the absolute best performance, and you can pick the best race, but if you just want to play whatever looks cooler, then it just totally draws down to whatever you want to play. There are best races. Humans, Blood Elves, and Orcs are the strongest races to play at the moment, but you can play whatever you want and still do well with it. And I know this for a fact. I've played many different races. I've played Draenei, Human, Blood Elf, and Panda. And all the races had something they just felt amazing. Human having that second Trinket is really good. Draenei having that extra self-heal made me feel like I was a Live Lord. Being a Blood Elf and being able to Blood Elf silence heals and score kills off of it was great. And being a Panda and being able to CC multiple people at once and have another ability to disrupt casts and have it serve that double purpose. Like, every racial is great in its own way. So genuinely, I would say play what you want, but if you want to be the best, pick out of those 2 races. So now with races covered, I'm pretty sure that covers everything. I apologize for it taking me so long to make this Windwalker guide, but I've had a pretty decent amount of free time on my hands recently, so I've just been able to record voice. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Monk help is still available if you want to leave your battle tag. I can answer questions, whatever you need. Sorry for making you guys wait for so long for this. Thank you guys for watching, hope this helped, and yeah, catch you guys later.